Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Concord Township Board of Trustees meeting for July 17th, 2024. If you would, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, Mr. Rose, please.
Mr. Dondorfer.
Present.
Mrs. Lucci.
Present.
Mr. McIntosh.
Present. Okay, moving into our meeting this evening, and we would like to welcome Silver Load, who will be making a presentation on Quail Hollow Hotel, and we have Rita McMahon here with us from the JED board. We appreciate you being here, Rita. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here this evening. The JED board, as you know, the JED board has been working as your economic development entity for a number of years, about 13 years now, I believe, or 14 years. And one of the things that we took on this year was to evaluate what was maybe some future uses for the Quail Hollow Hotel and property. As you all know, that property's been closed for some time. We've been challenged with, I know the township's been challenged with, and us as economic development entities been challenged with what's the future use of this property. And so we undertook created an RFP to hire a consulting firm to go in and evaluate what the current market status really is of that property. I had forwarded to you last week their report, so you hopefully have all seen their basic report that they had done. But what we're going to ask Silverlode to come up tonight and present is a summary of what that report says and kind of what some of the uses based on their market analysis, and this is based on market analysis, might make sense for that property going forward. So we have with us here tonight two representatives from Silverlode. We have Dennis McAndrew and Rebecca Newman.
Okay, great.
Rebecca, right? Rachel. I always get Rachel and Rebecca confused. Okay, Rebecca Newman, who will present to you the summary of that report and then be in a position to hopefully answer any questions you might have. And then we can also then talk about what our kind of our next steps are after this.
Great.
So,
well, welcome.
Dennis.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good evening again. Dennis McAndrew. I'm the founder and president of Silverlode Consulting. We're here in Cleveland. We've been in business since 2002. I'm pleased to be here tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to assist you with Quail Hollow and for the opportunity to present the findings tonight. The last time I gave this presentation, it took 2 hours, and so we're going to try to jam it into 15 minutes tonight.
Okay.
So I'll go quickly, and then maybe you guys can ask me to pause or ask questions as we go along.
Okay, great.
All right. Cue slides. Go ahead to the next one. Oh, one more, please.
There you go.
Oh, sorry. Now I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, that one. All right. So quickly, what we'll go through what we did, what the study, what the exercises we went through to assess the property are. We'll talk a little bit about the property itself. We'll talk about some of the conditions that we saw at the property when we were there. Talk generally about the development market conditions. We'll go through a variety of different potential uses and whether or not they make sense in the current market. Some impediments to redevelopment, and then finally some recommendations. And then I think it goes without saying, I mean, I'm going to talk about sort of financial feasibility in the current market for the property. Obviously, there's a whole nother layer of, is it suitable for zoning? Is it conducive to the surrounding uses that weren't? I mean, of course, they were considerations in our reporting, but really the sauce that we bring to the recipe is the assessment of market conditions. And just a little bit about our firm. So we've been in the business of doing economic development and real estate consulting for over 2 decades now. But we're also part of a bigger firm called GBX Group in Cleveland, which is annually about $100 million real estate investment fund. So we buy $100 million of real estate every year. Within our firm, part of our team is a whole, we call them our acquisitions team that evaluates buildings that we're considering buying. And our portfolio includes hospitality and office and multifamily and retail. I think the only ones that are missing are we don't have any industrial and we don't have any what's the word I'm looking for, like assisted living facilities. But we cover all the other markets. So I had a lot of help from our acquisitions team who went through the same assessment exercise for Quail Hollow that they would have gone through for a building that we would have considered buying ourselves. And we buy properties nationwide.
Okay.
Okay. So real quick about the methodology, the key things, a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of interactions with the JED board, a lot of interactions with the owner's rep, fire department. We took a tour. We looked at hard at the existing site conditions. What it would cost to rectify some of those? What it would cost to demolish the buildings? What it would cost to construct new structures in the different uses? We did a full market analysis. What are rents in the different use sectors? What are operating expenses? We put together high-level pro forma financial analyses that we won't go. They're not in here. Otherwise, this would turn into a 2-hour meeting. Suffice to say, there's a lot that went into this. Next slide, please. For those who don't know, and I'm sure the folks at the front here know all too well, the property is 2 parcels. It's about 11.1 acres on the, I guess that's the south side of the road, and then a smaller 1 acre parcel on the north side. 176 guest rooms, pools, conference center, restaurants, workout facilities, 170,000 square feet, and then obviously great visibility from I-90. Access not ideal, but just superb visibility. Next slide, please. I don't think you could really do a thorough examination of it without understanding what's going on out there. And there's a lot going on at the building. The most notable thing, and this is a problem that surfaced 3 years ago or so, it turns out there's a storm sewer that was originally outside of the conference center, but ultimately through expansions was built over that storm sewer. And I'll show you a diagram on the slide that follows. That storm sewer is collapsing. It appears to be steel and it appears to be rusted out. So it's collapsing along its length. It runs across. It appears to run. I'm not a civil engineer, but it appears to run along the back of the building and then run under the building out to the front. So what you can see is there's a number of sinkholes. There's a big area behind the building that collects water. It used to collect water. Now what water is able to go through the pipe bubbles up through the floor of the conference center. It also is going in through a collapsed pipe in the front of the parking lot. And it appears while they're pumping that out, you can tell if you visit the site, they're pumping the water out as it fills the building, or it fills the depressed area behind the building, but it doesn't look like there's really any measures to address, to fix the problem, just to kind of address the water that's standing in there. So with the diagram showing there on the lower part, that's the back of the building. The upper part is the front of the building. The blue lines are where we think the storm sewers seem to run. We think they're all kind of funneling under the building, and then the 3 dots across, that's the center of the building there, represent the sinkhole in the rear, in the lower right, a sinkhole in the conference center in the center there, and then the sinkhole in the front property there up in the upper left. All right, next slide, please. That, of course, is the most severe issue at the site. But another, almost equally notable condition is the easternmost building of rooms, which I think is a 3-story building. At some point in the past, had a fire sprinkler leak that resulted in mold, and so that building is completely gutted. No drywall, no floor coverings, no furniture, no nothing. So that's completely gutted, and that's a pretty meaningful part of the overall room count of the facility. I'll pause real quick. Does anybody have any questions or anything? No. Okay. The list kind of goes on. Key HVAC components are beyond their useful life. Fire alarm system is not functioning. Requires replacement. The property layout's not ideal. I mean, it started out as a relatively small property that was just added onto. Well, if you notice the layout from the front, it slopes from side to side, and it slopes from back to front. And as they did those expansions, they just kind of climbed the hill. So it's not like you have one nice, consistent, level facility. You've got, facilities connected by ramps and stairs and things that are not ideal. And you have a bit of a sprawling layout. Interior finishes obviously are absolutely interestingly intact. You walk into some of the rooms and it's, other than looking really old, they look like they're move-in ready. So it's kind of funny, other than the ones that are gutted, that is. Parking lots are bad. There's just a host of other issues. So go ahead. So one of the questions we were tasked with is, what's the likelihood of reusing the current building? And this is a matter that our firm specializes in historic buildings. So we do a lot of reuse of existing buildings, and we're always kind of balancing, what does it cost to rehab a building versus to construct new. So we have we lost the slide show. There we go. So this is an area that I think we're fairly well versed in. The property's history, and we'll talk about this on the hospitality sort of overview in a bit, but the property's history, it was of course a thriving sort of event center, corporate events. When corporate events, in-person corporate events were big, it was special events, business travelers, etc. A lot of that market's dried up. Of course, it was also, as many of you know, it was built to serve as or at least portions of it were built to be the clubhouse for the country club, and so it's got a lot of things that were appropriate for the market at the day, were appropriate for a partnership with a country club that doesn't exist. So it's not. It's not an easily reusable, layout in our opinion. Plus, you've got some of the physical issues, and you've got just kind of the sprawling nature of the facility, and just a big change in the market. So, in our opinion, and the cost of renovating it would be probably as high as demolishing it and starting new and starting fresh. As we were touring the building, we were looking for good bones. We're still looking. So we just didn't find a lot out there. No surprises here. Anybody who picks up the paper knows that the real estate development market conditions are just abysmal right now. Maybe abysmal is a bit of an exaggeration, but they're not good. Interest rates are at a 15-year high. Commercial lending is extremely tight, especially in certain sectors. Like, it's particularly hard to get financing for a hotel project, hospitality project. Particularly hard to get one for an office project. All others are, much harder than they were just a few years ago, pre-pandemic. But those two uses are really hard to finance right now. And then construction costs. We skipped one bullet. Construction costs, as everybody's heard, are way up. They're somewhere 20% north of where they were pre-pandemic. They're stabilizing, but they're not reversing. So going through the uses quickly, hospitality, as I said, the property's really equipped for or tailored for a food and beverage heavy operation, which, as I said, the market for that, and even the owner's representative will acknowledge that the market for that sort of property has largely dried out. Now, the one thing I want to say is these are, this is what we think the market indicates. But you always have those outlier situations, like I'm thinking of, for those of you who know it, the Gervaisi Vineyards in Canton, right? There you have, built from scratch, a brand new event center, and attracts weddings and corporate events. In fact, our company has events there. So there are instances of reuse of properties like this, or development of properties as sort of that event center, that full service hotel with a high level of amenities. But it's probably a remote possibility. I think Gervaisi's had some special circumstances. They had a particularly well-heeled or well-capitalized developer there. So I'm bearish on any particular use, I'm certainly not precluding it from the range of possibilities. But the market doesn't suggest that's a use. So yeah, just to give you a sense of the market, the hospitality market, it's recovered from the pandemic. The Cleveland area market has recovered since the pandemic, but it hasn't really improved since the pandemic, and it's not really expected to. So the measure in hospitality is revenue per available room night, or RevPAR, and it's about $77, or at least when we pulled the stat, it was about $77, which is about roughly where it was pre-pandemic, and that's not a number that would trigger trigger a lot of new construction of hotels. It should also be noted that the hotel data that we were able to find was for the wider Cleveland market. We weren't able to drill down specifically to a tight circle around this, but for a variety of reasons, hospitality would be a less likely option. One other thing of note. The site competes from a hospitality perspective, from a multifamily perspective, from a retail perspective, or it will compete with the Bolton and Osborne properties at 615. At least on the Bolton side, there's some reserved for residential. I think there's for retail. I think there's a hotel plan there. We talked to some of the brokers that represent that development group, and at the time, they weren't getting a lot of interest in the retail sites. They were getting quite a bit of interest in the multifamily residential, not a lot in the retail. I'm not sure about the hotel, but this does compete directly with those two sites. Office, there's really not a lot to talk about here. I mean, the vacancy rates are really high. Rents are probably going to continue to decline. Work from home, sort of as that winds down a little bit, you might see a little bit more interest in office. But again, lenders aren't lending into it. There's not a lot of demand for it. So a multi-user or multi-tenant office on that site is probably not likely. Now, what potentially would be like a single user medical office or a professional services office or something like that, but it would probably be someone who was already kind of in this area that needed a bigger footprint. But for someone to develop it as a multi-tenant office building, is probably remote. Retail's vacancy is okay to high. Inflationary growth in rents, that is to say, basically flat. Not a lot of construction activity. The little bit of activity that's out there is amongst sort of the dollar store kind of variety of retailers, discount retailers. We've talked to some brokers who represent some available spaces in the shopping center just off 44 here. We've talked to the brokers for the Bolton property, and they all confirm that there's just not a lot of activity in the retail sector right now. And again, you're competing with 615. Market rate multifamily. I put this in the category of question mark. What we see is $2 rents per square foot are kind of that point where it starts to become really interesting to folks for new multifamily residential. And the immediate area around here is not quite there, but bumping up against that with some properties that are approaching that, some of the higher amenity, newer properties. And so it's that may not be a possibility immediately, but it may be in the future. Although I will say, through this process, we did have one developer contact us about multifamily development there, and the owner, since we started this process, reached out to Rita to say that he's had some inquiries from folks that want to do multifamily development on the site. So it's kind of like right there. It could be a candidate for multifamily residential. My guess is if someone came to you with a multifamily proposal, they would probably, given the current high construction, high interest rate, the condition of the site, they would come looking for some level of incentives to assist with that, whether it's abatement, real estate abatement, or TIF, or something like that. Light industrial, and I'm thinking when I say this, I'm thinking like Stephen Douglas Corporation, just across 44, something like that. I mean, really light, a lot of high in that case, high paid engineers, prototyping, high tech equipment. I'm sure you've all heard the industrial market, although it's getting a little bit softer right now, it has been red hot. Vacancy rates in the market are about 1.3%, which is unbelievable. The rents are increasing over 7% last year, 22% in the last 3 years. You can't find industrial buildings that aren't old or obsolete in some way. So we see that as a possibility. Obviously, there's compatibility considerations, but from a market perspective, industrial we think has some real potential. The visibility there is an asset for someone that would want to have their business seen from the interstate. This is an instance where, again, anyone that was bringing a site like that might be looking to the township for some level of assistance to help make that possible, particularly given the need to demolish what was there to make that happen, and to do some pretty extensive regrading of the site and correct those drainage issues. Senior housing is another one that we think has potential if the community deemed it as appropriate, and senior living. When we say it, we mean like kind of the entire continuum of care, right? From the age restricted, no assistance needed, all the way to memory care, skilled nursing, and everything in between. That's a hot market. That the baby boomers, of course, are driving the demand for that. What's notable is there's a large and growing proportion of high income 75-year-old plus folks, and so they have the wherewithal to pay for facilities like that. So rents are quite high, and they certainly make that a development option that has some potential. The other thing is assisted living facilities. They typically or almost never are looking for any sorts of incentives. But of course, the counter to that is, depending on what the use is, it may or may not require additional attention from your EMS services, fire services, etc. I think this is the last one, but no surprise here. This falls into the kind of the duh category. Obviously, I think single-family housing, that market continues to be hot, although softening. Prices are falling a little bit, I noticed, but it's a red hot market, and I think Andy and Morgan and Rita have all had outreaches, and probably you as well have all had outreaches from single-family home builders that would be interested in that site. Of course, the price would have to be right. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think single-family, if that was something that the township desired, would be an option. So just kind of to recap, the less viable use is office, hospitality, multi-tenant retail, and then the more viable light industrial, which that being, that and senior living being really the two most promising opportunities, multifamily, residential, and single family being right there behind. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about some of the impediments to redevelopment. I know we've talked about quite a few of them already, but one biggie is the time that I spoke to the owner's rep, the asking price for the property was $7 million. I think there's been some interest. He indicated, in the caretaker of the building have indicated they've had a few tours of the building over the years. It seems like it's been in the senior living space, although most recently he emailed Rita to say that there was some interest from a multifamily developer that was thinking about a connected hotel or something like that. So we don't know how realistic or how real rather that inquiry was, but so there's been some interest from multifamily. I didn't sense a lot of urgency on their part to sell. The asking price is quite high, but when you layer on top of it that most of those uses would require complete demolition of the property, we're ballparking. We have some construction cost estimating software in our shop, and it's a little bit tough to pin it down because you don't know exactly what's out there. But we're figuring it's probably about a $1.5 to $2 million exercise to pull everything down there, and that doesn't include addressing the topography, the sort of cupped topography and drainage problems. So our thoughts on some things that the township and the JED might consider. One, and I should preface this by saying I mentioned this to the owner's rep. I mentioned to him that there's the state of Ohio has. For those of you who track it, they are kind of on again, off again with funding for demolition and funding for brownfield remediation. Well, we're in the on again phase right now. We have a couple years of demolition funding from the state, competitive demolition and brownfield funding from the state. I don't know how much longer that program lasts. We're about to get a round of awards any day now, and then the next round's going to open. But there is some state money available for demolition if that was something that the property owner was interested in. The other thing I would encourage the township, and perhaps you guys have already done this, but is to think ahead to, if you have inquiries in these different spaces, what if anything would you be willing to provide in terms of incentives? How would you structure something? Obviously, the developer's going to bring some ideas of their own, but it never hurts to kind of have those discussions so that you're ready to respond to something rather when it comes in. We'll skip that next bullet. We also suggested that you put this sites of this size are, especially with this kind of access and proximity to Cleveland, and the industrial space are relatively few and far between. So we thought it would be worth, and there's no cost, and it's quite easy to just list it on Jobs Ohio's available site database, so that when companies come looking at Ohio and they ask about sites that fit a certain parameter set, you can that they can respond. They have a ready database, so that's an easy item that can get you on the map. And then broad outreach campaign to developers and potential others. I know Morgan and Rita and Andy are out at the shopping center convention. I think that's great. Just the mere act of undertaking the study and having it written about a little bit in Cranes, and I think in the News Herald and other places, has triggered some inquiries. I just shared Rita's contact with one gentleman today, and there was another one from another development company in multifamily about a month or so ago. So, I think just kind of raising the visibility of what's out there, because it is an asset. It's an asset with some hair on it, but it's an asset nevertheless. Raising some awareness of it will definitely help. I think that's it for our sort of prepared presentation. What questions can I answer for you about the site, our findings, etc.?
Questions? Thank you.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it was
great
presentation. It's obviously been a concern of the boards and a big concern of a lot of the residents of the community, because it's the first thing you see when you come into Concord Township. So, it's good to get an idea from your perspective, your professional perspective on, what use might be most appropriate there, and and what anybody that looks on at moving on this site, what the limitations are and what the, issues that they're going to be dealing with are. It's a big heavy load to get through, I think, before you can do something prosperous with it. Mm-hmm. But
it's a great site. It's certainly got it's got hurdles associated with it, but it's a great site, and I'm sure that the right use is going to be found. It's just a matter of time. And
what is your professional opinion, since you say there seems to be a lack of urgency regarding the point price we're at, or they've been at? Do you think that over time that would be a negotiable issue?
I would suspect so. It strikes me as a quite high price for what's there.
I mean, in your opinion, what would you, if you can, would you put a number on it or
I
not?
couldn't really ballpark it. Yeah,
Okay.
it's high though.
I know
It's
a couple.
really-
There, my understanding is there was at least one offer, and maybe one that was considered, but basically, I think the offers some of the local people have thrown have been like around the 2.5 mark. So and those people are making those offers with the understanding that they have the 1.5 to $2 million cost
demo.
of
Yeah.
dealing with
Right.
whatever is going to happen there.
Right.
So these people, I mean, my sense is though some of the local people are looking at this as a $4 to $5 million investment, and then they're going to do something to try to make money on that.
Right.
So there's the economics of trying to understand where that investment group is and what they're willing to settle for, and there's obviously a gap, a big equity gap.
Yeah, it's really kind of a sad situation because it used to be a great place and now it's really an eyesore, and we hear from our residents all the time, what can we do, what can we do? And I think I appreciate your report. A lot of this we've kind of already heard, and to be honest, I was hoping to hear something a little more, be a little more optimistic, and but miracles happen. There are developers out there that this is the right site for them, and so we, like you said, the visibility, hopefully that helps, but we need to do something.
I think just to put a cap on it, and I would, I don't know, validate or but echo what Dennis said. Last 2 years, I've only been to ICSC for 3. This is my 3rd this spring. For the last consecutive 2 post-COVID, we've heard consistently that the cost of big projects are just, you talk to some of the developers or some of the people down there, and they get their booths, they get the big pictures of the legacy villages and the pine crests and all of this, and nobody's doing those now.
Yeah.
Because their margins are so, the math doesn't work on it. There's a lot of stuff going on, ironically, the small parcels we have interspersed around Concord where we see that activity. That's the kind of stuff that we're being told is happening, where the dollars are a little bit smaller and the economics work. You look at something like this and we're in that big space, right? This is the thing. And going through and getting the tour, I learned a lot more about the hotel than I ever knew before participating in some of the process. But when you look at how it was developed, it started out as a motor lodge, it morphed into a slightly bigger hotel, and then they partnered up with a golf course, and then they put a conference center and connected it all, and it was this whole thing. And what are we, about 2 or 3 hours walking from one end to the other of it, and you realize how big that is, and just it's really dated in the concept. I know, Amy, to your point, this report isn't really what a lot of people I think were hoping to hear, but you realize that is a structure that is from an era bygone, right? Take a look at the Holiday Inn that was built. Nobody builds hotels like that anymore. It's so dated in the infrastructure. I mean, you didn't touch on, but those cooling towers. I mean, they've got these massive cooling towers on the oldest part of the building that dates back to the 60s that they don't work.
Yeah, they're shot.
And just the process of either getting them out or dealing with them it's a huge. So the topography, the water, and those cooling towers. I mean, even though sinkholes aren't collapsing structurally the building, they're just dealing with that one part. It's how do you repurpose it? I mean, you said when we met that the economics of the hotel, the numbers they were getting, their revenue per room and their low vacancy rate, it was a sinking ship 7 years ago.
Yeah. Even before we saw the offering documentation for when they put the property up for sale in 2020 or 2021, and the trend information of the economic statistics, it was already pre-pandemic, it was taking a pretty precipitous dive. Now, part of that was probably as a result of the mold and the gutting of the one building, but it was, pandemic was just the last straw, and then the the sinkholes were the icing on that cake.
I think we also, too, the loss of the country club. I mean, that was
Yeah,
a whole
that
hook that
started
had a
it
lot
all.
of traffic. And when that relationship fell apart, it's where it all
separated,
just
right.
started. And I think I like a lot of, I mean, I've been looking at some of this stuff for a while, so I had an idea this was coming, but it's like, it'd be great to see someone come in, and you look at it now, and I mean, where do you see stuff like this? You said Gervaisi, built from the ground up. I mean,
Right.
and this was just a kind of put together hodgepodge. What I know something we talked about in one of the meetings was senior housing. We talked about that senior and assisted, and there was the talk about. But you gave us some information on the legs, the duration. You can like. If someone were to come in and invest in that kind of facility, put it on that site, and this is something we could expect to be viable for quite a period of time.
Yeah, that they it's beyond a decade where there's expected to be continued growth in the sort of age bracket that would use a facility like that. So it's not a short-term opportunity. It's you know, a decade plus where the economics are, and the economics are you know, strong. They're not marginal today. They're really strong and expected to continue for the long haul. I know in one of our meetings, someone raised the issue of what's the end of life for you know, a senior living facility look like, and they specifically reference you know, conversions to other less desirable uses, and in this case, you know, I think what's happening there is older facilities that probably have some obsolescence issues. In this case, you know, look at like the Vitalia facility at 615, and then you've got another. Actually, this is one of the highest performing senior facilities here, just across 44 in the area. So, you know, very vital today, and expected to remain that way for a long, long time.
Yeah, you see a lot of those facilities coming up in different areas all the time.
I think I guess my thought process was the key, at least sitting here as a trustee and then JED board member. I think the challenge for us is to sort of attract the interest to any of what is viable, and then take a look at what something like that might look like and work a deal out with whoever's there and decide how do we fit something like that into our community. And I know, I think a lot of our residents are, you know, probably hoping that this report's the silver bullet that helps us land a hotel developer that's going to bring glory back to, which it doesn't seem, it doesn't, that is just not in the room. I mean, we weren't surprised.
But it gives us more information, you know, more direction. For sure.
I do know when we met at the end of June, the quarterly JED board meeting, that something that did come up, and I guess I'll let you guys, but the JED board is looking for direction from the board, and I don't know if, or from us, from the township side of economic development here, and I don't know if Rita wants to spend a little time talking about what might be some next steps. We've been running around the treadmill at ICSC talking about this, and it's just been sort of, you know, this thing's here. My sense from, you know, sort of a sales perspective, we start talking to people, we need to get into some nuts and bolts before someone's going to really spend some time to do diligence.
Right, because one of the things, we did market this property out at ICSC. We had a brochure put together and we took it and we, you know, talked to a lot of local brokers. Several of them are very interested in getting copies of the report. I didn't want to release it to anybody until you guys have seen it, so we'll start releasing it to other entities. But one of the things is, you know, right now, there's a lot of uses in here that may or may not be desirable from the township standpoint to be located at that location. So that discussion, I think, has to be had on which of these are more desirable than others. I think we also need to have a follow-up conversation now with the property owner. Or his representative. Unfortunately, the property owner's in New Zealand, and we're not able to talk to them directly, but we have had several conversations with and ongoing emails with the U.S. representative. My sense, I did send him a copy of the report. He read it. As soon as he read it, he emailed me and said, we need to talk. Okay, so he's kind of on board to understand that, okay, what we're looking at, what he's looking at aren't meshing, obviously. So I think that's the next step that we have to take. I think also then we need to understand, like what kinds of uses you want or would like to go after, because one of the things that happens right now is you get some of these developers, the first thing they do is they call and they ask for what's the zoning on this property, and the zoning on this property pretty much only allows what's there now.
Right.
And so, if we're going to consider marketing to some of these other things, there has to be a certain confidence or comfort level from whoever we're talking to that some of those things could happen.
Right.
So that's not a JED issue. That's obviously a township issue. But we'll certainly work with you in any way that we can. And then the whole idea of incentives. Are you willing to look at TIFs? Are you willing to look at, different types of TIF, not just the TIFs that go back and support the development itself, a 41 TIF versus a 40 TIF. They allowed you to use the money back, put the money back into the development. Are you willing to, do types of tax abatement? If you are, for what kinds of things and those sort of things. So those discussions, I think, have to occur as well.
Okay.
Before we can really push in a particular direction. And we don't want to get ahead of you as your economic development people.
Right.
We want to work in concert. So I was mentioning to Mr. McIntosh that I think after this, one of the first things we need to do is sit down and have a call with that developer or that owner and say, okay, you read it, we read it. Where are you at now? Are you still on that $7 million number? Have you come off that? Have you changed your mind about anything? Do you see any opportunities anyplace else? And I think that's a good place to start, understand where he's coming from, and then work with you kind of parallel, and maybe, Heather and Andy and to see, okay, which of these uses would you prefer?
Right.
Which are more desirable? What do you think fits best in that region of the township? And then we move out from there.
Wanted to add something to Rita. We had a call with somebody, it's a little over a year ago, I think it was last spring, that had looked at it. I believe it was along the lines of senior living, something to that effect.
Right.
And
Independent.
Independent, right? It was housing, senior housing. And one of the things, the biggest part of the conversation was, what can you do for us? Again, paddling upstream of these economics, they were looking for probably a lot of incentives and a lot of heavy lifting on our part. I got the sense of stuff that is well beyond anything the township or the JED have done to date.
Yes.
It is a sizable project, so I bring that up just from a standpoint of we need to prepare ourselves for, this thing is going to take us in new directions, I suspect, get us involved in things that we haven't traditionally dealt with here in Concord, probably to get something. We're going to have to think outside the box on this one, I think.
And I think, not to say that the project might not happen without those things, but I think depending on what timing you would like to see something happen. Obviously, projects that have more incentives attached to them, more things that can help push things along, tend to move a little bit more quickly. The market may turn around. We anticipate it will. It's gone through cycles in the past. It's going through a cycle now. The market's going to turn around at some point. It may be desirable, but how long do you, as a township, want to have that property sitting there in a continuous state of decline and disrepair, and obviously an owner right now who doesn't have a lot of motivation, as Dennis said, to put any money back into it. And the property manager who was there made that very clear, that it's been very difficult for him to get resources to make minor repairs. He's extrently frustrated too.
Right. Even landscaping, getting the
Yep.
grass.
Yeah.
Mowing the lawn,
That's just,
patching
Yeah.
holes in the roof. Yeah. Yeah. Or fixing when they get, there was one portion of the sprinkler system that was still active, and it had a leak in it, and just getting somebody, he had to shut the whole system down because it's a real antiquated system. It isn't isolated in different areas, and just to get the resources, to get the materials to make the repair himself was difficult.
wow.
So it's a challenging situation all the way around, given the current ownership structure.
Well, we appreciate your insight and your guidance, and it's one of our top priorities, and we'll move forward on having some dialogue on what we think might be best suited use for the township. And we appreciate your report also. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rita.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. I'm gonna be here tomorrow around 1:30.
Oh, perfect. Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
You can't leave. Thank you.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just, you know, when you think about, like you said, how long that's been there, and, you know, I remember going there as a kid and using the pool and the facilities there, and it's just,
Well, there's a number of challenges, but
yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Yep. I think in the investment of having this report, it's interesting to what Rita said about the representative. We've had a lot of back. I know Rita's had, and I've been privy to a lot of her conversations with them, and it's been a pretty hard line. Their reaction to the report's interesting. So I'm kind of curious to hear that, and I'll check up on.
Well, if that alone kind of jumpstarts something, then it's definitely worth it.
Right.
Well, I think
Right.
we got to get past what they're asking. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the.
Exactly. And if that jumpstarts that, maybe
Right.
bringing that price down, then
Mr. Rose.
Yeah, I think internally we'll take a look at potential uses in zoning. We'll also, we'll take a look at, possible incentive packages. I don't know that I'm a big fan of giving away the farm, but there are some creative ways to offer incentives to developers to redevelop it. There may be a program through the land bank that helps do something like this through the Lake County Land Bank. But I think once we put, between zoning and the staff and get some input from Jed, and we put this together, then I think maybe, give us, a couple weeks to a month, and then maybe we schedule a work session so that we can talk freely, and put options on the table, whiteboard it, and have a work session, and try to figure out, okay, this is palatable, these options are off the table, and then we talk about zoning opportunities, incentive opportunities, and at the same time, I know Rita and I are talking, she's going to be here tomorrow afternoon, we're going to reach out to the owner's representative who's here in the U.S. and get his, I know he's got the report, he's read the report, I don't have his feedback yet, but he's somehow, some way, there's got to be an appeal to the investment group in New Zealand to be more realistic. I don't know how to do that, but those steps will start, those conversations will start tomorrow with the U.S., with the representative here in the U.S., and at the same time, coordinate with department heads and staff, on potential rezoning and uses, and then I'll look at incentive packages, and then put together some slides, and then maybe we can have a work session and try to hammer this out.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, moving on through the meeting this evening, and we will move into the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the July 3rd, 2024 public hearing meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the July 3rd, 2024 regular trustee meeting minutes.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the July 8th, 2024 staff meeting minutes.
I will second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And I move to approve the July 8th, 2024 public hearing meeting minutes.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And lastly, I will make a motion to approve July 8th, 2024 special meeting minutes.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the elected officials reports, and giving our fiscal officer, Mr. Patriarcha's report this evening will be our administrator, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Patriarca is out of town. So the brief update from the fiscal officer is as follows. The fiscal office can confirm that the 2025 tax budget was hand-delivered to the Lake County Auditor's Office on July 9th following the approval from the board. Our regular monthly financial report will be available at the upcoming trustees meeting on August 7th. And if residents have any questions regarding township finances, please contact the fiscal office directly here at Town Hall. That concludes the fiscal officer report.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to trustees report and Mrs. Lucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had the honor of swearing in our new fire department captain, Troy Yoder, this evening, along with our new lieutenant, Adam White, just a bit ago, and we couldn't be more excited and more proud of these men and their level of commitment to our community and their team. We wish them the best in their new roles and know they will continue to do amazing things for Concord. We also got to congratulate Captain DJ Calhoun on his retirement after 26 years and thank him for his inspiring leadership and service. It will be sad to not see him every day, but I know everyone is happy DJ can retire and enjoy the next chapter in his life. So congratulations to DJ and enjoy. Concord is really lucky to have an incredible fire department staff, leadership. I mean, all those guys there are just incredible individuals, and I feel so great that they are taking care of our community and what they do. It means everything. So it's been a crazy few days for our country. You know, as I think about this, I think it's a reminder that we can't go forward unless we find some common ground and a commitment to our values and our shared pride. You know, we may not agree on many things, but we can agree on being respectful, mature citizens in all of our actions. You know, we see it on a national level. We also see it on a local level. People are very passionate about what they believe in, but that has to be grounded in what's best for all of us and keeps us safe, protected, and allows us to have as peaceful a life as we possibly can. So that's very important to me as I'm thinking about all this. But aside from that, Silver Lode, I really appreciate their report. Again, I was hoping for a little bit more, you know, but we have, I think, direction. And Mr. Rose, I appreciate your follow-up as to what the next step should be. And I think that will help entice maybe some future developers and also get the owners to kind of wake up a little bit and hopefully work with us. I know a lot of folks really have questions, and we get questions all the time from residents. What can we do? What can we do? Aside from that, I think folks are really enjoying our summer concerts. We look forward to tomorrow with what's In Cahoots.
In Cahoots.
And also we look forward, it's coming up, our big community celebration on August 10th with our parade, our pancake breakfast, music, food, and of course, fireworks. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. McIntosh.
Well, Mrs. Lucci, not to take anything away from the band, but I think you forgot about one very important attraction tomorrow night. And I know there's at least two gentlemen here that are on pins and needles over Frank's Brats coming
Absolutely.
tomorrow.
Frank's Brats is here
Frank's
tomorrow.
Brats.
That's true. We have been
We
waiting.
mentioned the band, and I look over at Andy, and he's just like, and?
Okay,
That's right.
you're right.
Anyway, yes, the summer concerts have been great, really well attended and nice weather. I know I was out of town for the Cookers, but the ones I've been for, we've had some really beautiful evenings. So looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night and at Community Day. It's always a great evening when we get to kick off a meeting night with promotional swearing-ins, but then these were promotions. And as we've said, every time we meet with the firefighters, we hear great stories. And if I was just to think about the last round of interviews, so you hear firefighters talk about calls and how they interact and what they learn and how they care about this community. To get the last round when they were looking for the promotions to lieutenant and captain, to listen to those stories, but then talk about it in the spirit of leadership. And as you see somebody as great as DJ retiring, as we saw with Deputy Chief Terriaco a couple years ago, you understand the spirit and you see the baton pass from generations and for the next leaders to come up. We really are blessed. We do have a great crew of firefighters. We have a great fire department. The culture has has been in place for a long time, and they do a great job stewarding it and passing it along. So very proud, very happy. Wish Lieutenant or Captain Calhoun the very best, and look forward to excellent things out of our Lieutenant Adam White and Captain Troy Yoder. The only thing I've really had are questions about a little bit back and forth and trying to set up some meetings with some residents that had questions about our budget and upcoming levy. We'll be talking about that, and Mr. Patriarch and I, Mr. Rose, are available. Anybody that wants to come, those meetings haven't got the traction I was hoping for, but we're here. And with that, concludes my report.
I appreciate that. Okay, I would also like to congratulate our new officers at the fire department and Mr. Calhoun on his retirement. As you stated, great group of guys. We have a cadre of great firefighters, and they do an awesome job there. Summer concert series, you mentioned that. All my points are, you covered most everything. I did it.
It helps to go first.
That's good. You're very thorough.
It's good to go first.
Yep.
Since the last meeting, I did have just a couple calls on a couple of civil concerns that a couple of our residents have. We were able to work through one of those regarding an easement and some maintenance on a roadway, bring all parties to the table that it looks like that's going to get done and completed with the cooperation of all three entities, and helped another resident with some issues regarding some trees in the some property that was cleared unintentionally on her property, and helping her with some work through some issues there. And I did also have some calls regarding the upcoming levy and the status of our safety services, and I know we're going to have some further dialogue later on in the meeting. So without that, moving on, we will move into our departmental reports, and Mr. Rose, our administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Dondorfer, members of the board, members of the audience, good evening. Start with a few items on the agenda. I think the big ticket item, item A, is Resolution 2024 TAC 22. That places a 3.9 mil fire levy on the November ballot. Just to recap, at the last meeting, the Board of Trustees passed Resolution 2024 TAC 20, which requested the certification from the Lake County Auditor's Office. That certification was received by us on July 9th, and it certified the 3.9 mil amount to bring in a revenue amount of $3,284,207 to the township. So this is the next step and in the process, and should this receive a favorable vote, then I will be delivering it to the Board of Elections tomorrow. Item C is a vote, that's for a purchase order to Southeastern Equipment in the amount of $48,919.63. That is for a new Case mini excavator. Our current mini excavator is very, very tired, and the bungee cords are stretching out a little too much, so it's time to replace it. On other news, on July 11th of 2024, I accepted on behalf of the trustees a resignation letter from part-time firefighter Jake Neas. The effective date of his resignation is July 23rd, 2024. We thank Jake for his service to the township, and we wish him well in his future endeavors. He is full-timing someplace else, and we congratulate him. The water line project continues to move forward. I anticipate having all the paperwork in place for our next trustees meeting on August 7th, and asking you to authorize this project to go out for bid. We are finalizing the timeline, and we anticipate getting some letters out to the affected residents in August. So that project is moving along smartly now that the funding is in place. The next coffee with the administrator is scheduled for Thursday, July 25th. That's at 9 a.m. in the Jordan Room at the Community Center. I am out of the office on this Monday, the 22nd. I'll be at the Clout Executive Board meetings down in Columbus. As a reminder, there's only one meeting in August that's scheduled for August 7th at 7:30 p.m. There is no second meeting in August, so After the August 7th meeting, we'll pick back up in September. I would like to congratulate Captain Yoder, Lieutenant White, and I wish much happiness to retired Captain Calhoun. And I hope he gets to do all the fun things that he's probably been putting off and is now going to have the time to take care of. And finally, congratulations to our newly minted pilot. I know that a lot of time and effort has gone into the studying and flying, and we've had several conversations, and avionics is well above my head, but Mr. McIntosh has completed and received his pilot's license, and I know that was a big milestone, so congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you.
And that concludes my report.
I'll add one thing to that, just a point of irony. The last trustee that held this office, my office, was also a pilot.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Concord has had a pilot
right.
as a trustee
That's
for
right.
quite some time now.
That's right.
I have Connie's seat.
Interesting, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on into our audience portion of the evening. If does anybody like to come up to the podium, you can do so now and state your name and address for the record. And we have nobody here. Okay. We will move into old business. We do have one item of old business. That's the residential incentive district regarding the villas of Canterwood, which will remain on the table. And we will move into new business for the evening.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve Resolution 2024-22, resolution declaring it necessary to levy a tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation.
I will second.
Okay, comments? I'll start off.
Sure.
You know, this is a very important time for our community. Thinking back to the joint safety initiative that we put on the ballot previously that failed, you know, I think we, in retrospect, coming back from that and trying to reevaluate the needs of the township and determine how we move forward and sort of think outside the box, I think it was a great step to create the Citizens Action Committee that did quite a thorough evaluation of the township's budget, the finances, the needs of the township as far as the safety services that we need to service a community of this size. And I was really impressed with their report and the recommendation. And in this situation, you know, I've been in public safety now for going on my 32nd year, and this is probably one of the most challenging periods of time that I can remember in public safety. And what I mean by that is one of the most difficult aspects of the public safety business right now is recruitment and retention of first responders. And communities need to prioritize that because we shouldn't be in the business of laying off those first responders because there's at such a premium right now. And as we talked about these promotions and the cadre of, you know, firefighters that we have and the great law enforcement representation that we have from the Sheriff's Department, I'm a big believer that safety services is a vital component to the health and wellness and vitality of any community. It promotes strong home values. It promotes strength and success in school systems. And if you have deteriorating safety services, I think it's detrimental over time to the health and well-being of any community. So that's why I think all of us on this board, looked so we looked at a new approach or a new perspective and an outward approach to sort of increase transparency and get a perspective or a view from people within the community that can maybe shed some insight on you know, how we move forward and how we can you know, sustain the services that we have here and increase their services over the next several years, because you know, tell you, we all know that having one law enforcement officer from the sheriff's department in a community that services 20,000 residents is just not acceptable. It's not acceptable for the residents to have one officer 24 hours a day. It's not safe for the officer to be out there. You know, the recommendation was that we look to getting to which the plan that was implemented in 2008 when I was at the sheriff's department, which was, you know, we need to fund 10 deputies. And that gives us 2 officers, 24 hours a day, you know, 365 days a year, because it takes 5 full-time deputies to create 1 full-time 24-hour officer within the limits. So that was a recommendation that the Citizens Action Committee made that I think is satisfactory and would serve the community well. And then we looked at the issue of sustaining our cadre of firefighters. And that's a little bit more involved because unlike the sheriff's entity and law enforcement, we don't have the additional responsibility of not only the personnel, i.e. the firefighters, we also have you know, equipment needs to sustain appropriate operations day to day. You know, and this goes back to where, you know, years ago when we determined that we needed new fire stations to keep our firefighters safe. But what we're talking about now is resources, manpower, equipment, and equipment to sustain appropriate operations for fire and law enforcement within the township. And, you know, my opinion in looking and reviewing the Citizens Actions Committee report is I really believe that the fire levy, a 3.9 fire levy, is the way that we can sustain both entities, i.e. law enforcement and fire, for the next 5 years or more for Concord Township. You know, a lot of what you heard and I heard with the failed safety levy was, you know, is some concern about the commingling of the funds in the permanent safety levy that both the fire department and law enforcement were drawing on. If successful in the fall with this fire levy, straight fire levy, it will allow us to free up money for the sheriff, which the budget for 10 deputies is close to about $1.6 million. It's about $160,000 per deputy sheriff, including you know, benefits and labor. So that would free up that money within the existing safety levy and allow us to fund the sheriff for, you know, extended period of time, which without having to go back to the voters of the community to sustain any additional needs for the sheriff, and at the same time would make us whole with the fire department and with our personnel, equipment needs and operational needs, you know, down the road. And an integral part of this was not only Mr. Rose, but our new fiscal officer, John Patriarca, who has really, you know, jumped on board on this thing and analyzed our budget and looked, you know, 5 years down the road and said, you know, this is the number we need to be at if we're going to be able to appropriately respond to the needs of 20,000 residents in Concord Township and had adequate staffing on the fire and law enforcement side. And if that suffers, it's unfortunate because, you know, what we're seeing is in this very challenging time for safety services is, again, recruitment's one thing, but retention is the other thing. And if there's not adequate services and we don't have appropriate equipment for our first responders, or we don't have adequate staffing levels that jeopardize our first responders, there are very attractive offers from various communities all over that are, you know, drawing first responders from other communities through lateral transfers by offering all kinds of incentives, from finances to additional time off to entering the field, you know, not as a new recruit or a new hire, but, you know, coming in with a level of service that gets you other incentives and benefits. So it's important. It's an important time for our community. I'm passionate about safety for our community because of all the things I said earlier. I think it's vital for the stability of the community. And, you know, I think one of the you know, looking at our last levy, one of the drawbacks I think we had challenges on was appropriate messaging and reaching out and connecting with as many people as we could in the community. It's different from years ago when everybody read the Telegraph or the News Herald and everybody knew what was going on in Concord and the other townships. Now you're challenged with social media, the internet, different social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, you know, the grapevine, and it's challenging to reach all those entities and try to express the appropriate message so everybody understands, you know, what the need is for this community. So I know we've got some ideas, and we're going to look at messaging and trying to connect with our constituents to try to message appropriately. I know another issue I heard in the failure of the previous levy is, you know, the township needs to do more to look outside the box and not rely as much on the taxpayer, and we appreciate that. I mean, we don't, you know, I agree with that, and I think that the Concord Township since that last election cycle has done a great amount of work on looking at all other financial alternatives to support other aspects and finances of the township's budget, you know, through grant funding, local funding, state funding, and federal funding to offset the costs to our residents. So we've done a lot of work. We haven't stopped, but it's important for us moving forward that I think we have the obligation as stewards of the township to put this before our community and give them the chance, one, to understand our message and the need, and then give them their opportunity to determine if, you know, what level of service they want. So I'm passionate about it. I think it's the right thing to do, and I'm confident with the amount that we're asking for, because I know that Mr. Rose and Mr. Patriarca did a very thorough job of as we did in reviewing it, as far as what the financial needs were for Concord Township, you know, 5 years or more down the road for our public safety.
I know that we're asking for a little bit more than last time, and you know, I think last year we were looking at it from the standpoint of trustees and having to deal with a levy campaign, as Mr. Dondorfer, and I think as you mentioned, we had the courage to have some outsiders take a look at it in the form of the committee, and so we let them take a look at it. They put fresh eyes on it and looked at it from their perspective, and we're accepting their recommendation, or the recommendation that they gave to Mr. Rose and he in turn gave to us. Mr. Dondorfer lays out a great, I mean, he knows this business very well and explains it well. 3/4 of our budget in safety services budget right now is dedicated to salaries. So when we talk about supporting our safety services, we're talking about human capital here. We're talking about contracted deputies and firefighter salaries. So if we don't secure this levy, it's very important. The cuts that are going to come to manpower. That's it. In addition, cost of infrastructure for IT are one of the things, and the capital equipment, and those are the cost drivers. We all know those things have gone up. We're looking at capital costs of millions of dollars more, just the increase. And while Mr. Dondorfer is correct and acknowledges the things that we've done, and previous boards have done, the JED, securing, you know, local government fund, these things alone don't support operations. They are not enough to pay the salaries. These are the numbers we need to support the salaries. These other things that we've done are going to be available when the levies or the departments need a little bit of extra money. That's what the JED was always intended for. It was one-time non-recurring expenses. Today we're using it for operational expenses, and that's why we need this levy. We've gone on before about how great our services are and how well they take care of our community, and this levy is critical. We need this to support continuing adequate safety service in Concord Township, both police and fire.
I believe you both summed up very well the reasons why it's important. You know, safety is number one. And I think all of our residents want that. They do. They understand, yes, we need this many firefighters to take care of this number of residents, the same with law enforcement. I think, you know, it's really hard to ask people for money, but I think what people really need to understand is what our funding mechanisms give us now. They don't give us enough to take care of everything we need to take care of. So we're not just asking for money to whatever. It's going towards very specific purpose that we don't have right now. And so people, please understand, ask questions, look at the budget, take the opportunities to take Andy's tax class, know where your tax money is going and why we need to ask for this money.
And I think, Mrs. Lucci, you hit on a good point. It's important to clarify, again, this is an operations levy. This is nothing to do with the bond levy that financed construction costs of a fire station.
Correct.
Totally separate issues.
Yes, sir.
This, and that didn't have anything, you know, these are separate buckets. Construction costs, operational budget. Operational budget's been the same forever. It was not affected by that construction deal. It is not in trouble because of a construction project. This is just the growth in our fire budget and safety budget.
Thank you both.
This will be a roll call vote.
Roll call vote, please. Mr. Rose?
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucci?
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the June financial report.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Service Department's purchase order to Southeastern Equipment in the amount of $48,919.63 for the purchase of a Case CX-37C mini excavator.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and moving into our future meetings and announcements, Mr. Rose, please.
Thank you, sir. August 5th at 3 p.m. will be the staff meeting here at Town Hall. August 6th at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall will be the Zoning Commission meeting. And then on August 7th, from 6:30 to 7:30 will be trustees' office hours in the conference room. And then at 7:30 will be the trustee meeting here at Town Hall. That's it.
Thank you. And
Thank
that
you.
concludes our trustee meeting this evening. Thank you and good night, Concord Township.